Hello, I'm Dr. Pierre Simon, and it's wonderful being back with you as we continue in this new series, Parenting with Purpose and Navigating the Journey with Confidence. And it is quite a journey. I don't know about you, but parenting has been the biggest challenge of my life, and I'm sure your life as well if you're parents. And in growing up, the biggest challenge of your life is getting through your childhood and the parenting that you were receiving, and hopefully it was good and you thrived from it. So we're looking at this in different segments, and in the segment that we're currently in, we're looking at the essential qualities of effective parents, building that foundation. Achieving empathy in parenting is the first subject that we've been discussing, and we're going to get into achieving consistency and patience and flexibility and attitudes, having a good attitude, a better attitude. So these are all important, but what I've noticed over the years and 3 decades of Christian counseling, these seem to be essentials that I've picked up on, necessary for teaching or helping new parents or even adults who have looked back on their childhood and gone through those difficulties that occurred, and making sense of it, understanding and getting healing. And oftentimes I see these essential qualities either lacking or visible. And when they're visible, you see the adult thriving, doing well and succeeding, or as well as can be. But in the essentials not being there in parenting, in growing up with parents like that, then there is a lot lacking that occurs, which you can learn along the way. You can grow, but first you have to identify, I need to work on this, and then do it. And that takes time, but you can still do it by paying attention and learning as much as you can, and admitting, I have a problem. I need to fix it. And with God's help, He'll give you the tools on fixing it. So the foundations of effective parenting, we're in part 2 today, from words to wounds, how lack of parental understanding, discernment, and we're using the word empathy, translates to foul communication or mean communication. Have you had a parent that was like that? I'm sure all of us parents at times got a little mean, a little upset, a little short, but then we regret it and we make up for it, and hopefully do it as infrequently as possible. But certainly we kick ourselves and say, I said it again, or I did it again, and okay, I got to do better next time. Well, when you're recognizing it, that's a big step right there. To see it is to say, okay, there's a problem, I got to make changes. There's a weakness, I got to improve in that area. And you go forward, and you're growing as your children are growing. Well, what's the definition of the role of empathy in communication, in verbalizations? Understanding the dynamics between empathy and communication in parenting is essential. It's needed, it's a must, it's vital, it's crucial. You can use whatever words there, you got to have it. Or the lack thereof can significantly influence how messages are conveyed to not only the children, but to one another. If empathy is not there, then when you're just wanting to say hello, that hello can come across different than it should, than you've intended it to. And that hello can be abrasive or a pushback. Once in a while, I'll get a text from someone, and it's just a text. And it might only be one word, but I'll get a pushback immediately on that one word. I'll get a sense of, oh, that doesn't sound good. And it may have been a very neutral word, but the feeling was there, the sense was there, the empathy was there, or discernment. And I know I believe I do have that spiritual gifting of discernment, so it's certainly added to because of that. But that's part of it. It's that first impression you get. And then I find out later, oh, yeah, that person was going through something or whatever at the time. And yet the communication had nothing to do with any of that. But with parenting, we pick up on that with our kids. We learn to pick up on that with our kids. And mothers do a better job than fathers with that, because mothers are more attuned to empathy than fathers are. Us men have to learn empathy. The women, they're kind of born with that. It's an innate thing about them. It's that intuitive ability that females have in the brain that we've spoken about that before, where they don't have that brain damage that us men have, and they think more globally, faster, getting more information, so they're picking up on not just what's being said, but everything else around it. And it's, immediately there's that understanding. Those dynamics then begin to occur where they're conveying that empathy to get information. Yeah. And a lot of men will complain to me, they're coming home and then the wife is, asking all the questions and getting, wants this information, that information. Well, she's gathering information because she needs it to put it together. It's the same in parenting. We need to gather that information from our children in order to know how are they doing right now and what do they need right now, because they're very vulnerable. The absence of empathy in a parent can make their communication appear harsh, mean. And, you might not be mean to you because you think that way. So you're used to thinking that way. It may not be abrasive to you because that's how you consider things and you speak to yourself that way. But to others, especially those more sensitive, And imagine a child hearing that, are they going to feel safe talking to you in the future? Empathy involves understanding another person's emotions and experiences from their perspective, not from your perspective. It's putting yourself in their shoes, as we've said before. It's a fundamental aspect of effective communication or verbalizations because it helps the communicator to tailor their messages to be sensitive to the feelings and the situations of others. When a parent can be that way with their children feel more comfortable being around them, and they draw towards them whenever they're uncomfortable. And that helps the parent to know, something's going on here, and let me give you comfort. Let me meet your need right now. And that's what God does to us. When we draw towards Him, He picks up on it. He knows what's going on, and we get that sense of His presence. And as a believer in Christ with the Holy Spirit in us, we connect far more easily when we reach out and we can sense that connection is there. Children can sense that connection is there or not there. Empathy and communication enhances understanding, builds connections, facilitates conflict resolution, promotes effective leadership, and enhances wholeness. And there's a whole lot more that it does as well. But that's a lot right there. Empathy enables one to grasp the subtleties of another's thoughts, feelings, promoting enriched communication, enriched verbalizations, minimizing misunderstandings. So I enjoy communicating with you. I enjoy talking. We're getting deeper into this and that Many of you have experienced that when you were dating, when you dated your wife or your husband, let's say, and you had that bond of communicating there, maybe speaking for 2-3 hours at a time, and even saying, wow, I never talked to anyone like that before, and we have so much in common and so much to talk about. And what does that do? It draws you even closer together. But you can imagine if you continue to do that in marriage, well, what's it doing? It's drawing you closer together. It's making your bond stronger. And yet doing it as a parent with a child, what is that going to do? Same thing, even more so, because you're shaping them, you're molding them, and they're drawing even closer to you when you can communicate with them in the ways they need that communication. And it doesn't have to be a big, long lectures. Definitely, I tell parents, don't lecture your children. They don't want to hear that. They'll turn you off like they flip the switch, and they're not even hearing you. So don't lecture, but communicate. What do they need to hear at the moment, or what do they want to hear? You don't have to be a permissive parent to tell them what they want to hear. I love you. I care about you. I'm concerned for this or that. I'd like to hear more about this or that. Or is there anything you'd like to talk about that we can have a discussion over? Or let's play a game. Board games are great. You communicate so well in board games. Of course, nowadays it's video games. I don't play video games, so I'll let you be the judge of that. But that enhances it. Brings about more of that empathy, closeness together. This understanding it's crucial in all forms of verbalizing, of communicating, whether personal relationships, professional settings, so at work, that's crucial at work to be a good communicator, or to be sensitive to the needs of your coworker, sensitive to the needs of your supervisor, sensitive to the needs of the owner, sensitive to the needs of the client. It's essential. Without it, there's going to be trouble. There's going to be problems. There's going to be a weakness developing in that department because they're not empathetic towards one another or the needs of the clients. Empathic or discerning communicating plays a vital role in allowing parents to understand and respond more effectively, more efficiently, going deeper into what's needed from that the children need, their thoughts, their emotions. You might consider the scenario where a child comes home, and I think you can remember this when you came home from school and you had a bad day at school, and you might have looked a little grumpy or sad, or your head's down, you're dragging a little bit, and the parent picks up on that, and they can see something's going on. Or if there's no empathy, they can't see something going on. So an empathetic parent might notice the child's mood and body language. Well, what's that going to do? They're going to be prompted immediately to, oh, what's wrong? Or you look sad, or what's up? What's going on? How was your day at school? Why are you gloomy? What's happening? And you want a cookie? My mom might say, "You want a cookie?" To get me to talk or something like that. Immediately scolding that child isn't going to work. Go do your homework. Why aren't you doing your homework? Go do your homework. That's not empathy. That might be rigid, legalistic, rule following. Rule followers lack empathy. We want to follow rules, but we want to follow rules with understanding, with love. Truth, love, freedom to make the choice. Truth, okay, the rule says this. Love, so I hope you follow the rule. And understanding, if you don't follow the rule, then there's going to be a consequence to it, and the consequence might be you're going to get a bad grade tomorrow because you didn't do your homework. It doesn't mean you have to beat them over the head with the lecture of why they should do their homework. This understanding enables the parent to communicate in a way that acknowledges the child's feelings, perhaps by saying, "You seem really upset about something that happened today. Do you want to talk about it?" This approach opens up a space for honest communication, truthfulness, but in love, in understanding. That gets conveyed to the child, and they say, "Yeah, it's safe talking to you, okay." Now, some kids just aren't going to say anything. They're just going to hold it in. Well, okay, that's all right. You don't have to make them communicate, but when they know it's safe being around you and that you care, that helps a lot. Caring is conveyed through empathy. When you display empathy or discernment or understanding, you're also displaying that you care, which means you love. You're concerned. You want their betterment. It's not all about you. People pick up on that. And over the years, I've noticed, especially in the field of counseling, a lot of people a whole lot smarter than someone else in counseling, but they can't convey they care, and they have to give up counseling because they're not earning an income, or they keep getting fired in the program they're working in, or whatever it might be. But then you got these others who are thriving, doing very well, who may not have the genius IQs and whatever else, but suddenly they're thriving. They have a lot of clients. They have clients who want to see them, and so on, because they're picking up on that person cares. That person is conveying, "I'm more important than they are." And that draws people to them. You want to be a parent that way. You want the kids to be drawn to you. You want to convey to them you care. And if you're conveying that, you don't have to say the perfect words all the time. You don't have to resolve the problems all the time. Just that conveyance of, "I care, talk to me, I want to hear what's going on. I want to know, I want to be there for you." Suddenly, they start opening up more as time goes by. In minimizing the likelihood of misunderstandings, if parent interprets children's upset state as misbehavior or disinterested in school responsibilities, is that lack of empathy and that rigidity, that legalism, that rule following, you do this, do that, and so on. And, why do I want to go home to that? You might say as a child. By fostering this kind of understanding, this kind of discernment, this kind of sensitivity in communicating, the parent helps the child feel supported and understood. And that's crucial. It's vital for their mental health, for even their physical health, because if they're feeling loved, their immune system is thriving. If they're feeling unloved, devalued, negative in some way, their immune system is actually declining. And their spirituality, their spiritual development stagnates. It doesn't grow. Their emotional intelligence stagnates. It doesn't grow. It also sets a foundation when a parent is empathetic for the child to learn that empathy, to learn to be sensitive themselves, to learn to make an effort to understand whatever's going on. And in doing so, they're expanding their mind, they're expanding their intelligence and their abilities to communicate with others. So communicating with empathy in parenting helps resolve immediate emotional disturbances and aids in the child's long-term emotional and social growth. So it's benefiting the child. And you'll find that parents with empathy, and keep in mind when I say parents with empathy doesn't mean that both parents have to have the empathy, but certainly if one parent has empathy, that helps a great deal. And there's a lacking of empathy in so many people. Most of the time, empathy can be learned, and we'll be talking about that later. But you can develop it by practicing it. However, there's times when, let's say, high-functioning autism, for example, they're going to have great difficulties with that range of emotions, and so when they communicate, they're telling the truth, but they're communicating it. But there's that inability to express empathy because they're in this zone of the way their mind functions. So if you have a parent like that, well, certainly you want another parent who has that empathy, and recognizing that, okay, I got to defer to that parent with the empathy and finding out what's going on, or in communicating in many ways with the kids, and then the other parent communicates with other needs that are going on. And sometimes you just got to say, well, maybe let's ask Mom to come in here and talk about this, and get that assistance if there's a lack there. So it doesn't mean if you're married to somebody who doesn't have empathy that, oh, it's going to be terrible and awful. No, it just means, hey, there's strengths and weaknesses in relationship. We balance. One has more strengths than another, or one has a strength that offsets the weakness of the other, and there's balance. And when that goes on, then there's thriving in the relationship and in the parenting as well. It strengthens relational ties, fosters trust and openness by showing genuine interest and concern for another's feelings. Communicating with discernment or empathy or understanding or caring, that plays a pivotal role in resolving conflicts. When there's a conflict, if we can convey in that manner to discuss the conflict, it gets resolved much faster than trying to communicate those things in a different way. By understanding and acknowledging the emotions and viewpoints of all parties involved, empathetic communication can lead to mutually beneficial resolutions that might not be reached through the adversarial means. Yeah, you can shut someone down by yelling at them or scaring them, putting fear in them or threatening them, but it's not going to resolve the problem. It's only going to make it deeper. Impact of lack of empathy on communication is great. When parenting lacks empathy, communication can become more self-centered and selfish. Wherever there's self-centeredness, that's self-protection, and wherever there's self-protection, there's selfishness. They're one and the same, you might say. They're glued together. And when that occurs, there's less consideration of the feelings of the child, less consideration of the feelings of the partner in the marriage, or friends, or coworkers, or in all the above. This can result in messages that are perceived as insensitive and harsh. For emotional intelligence, individuals who score lower on empathy or understanding or sensitivity are more likely to engage in communication that is interpreted as aggressive or mean, harsh, because they're less attuned to how the words affect others. Once again, they may think that way, not realizing how it affects others. Helping them to realize is the first step. Them receiving what you're trying to say to them is the next step. They may not receive it, and they can just continue. In fact, if they're rebellious, they may tend to become worse in enhancing that in order to prove they're right, you're wrong. But if not, then you're planting seeds each time, as long as you're doing it in empathetic way, in a loving, caring way of expressing, then you're planting those seeds, and each time you're fertilizing those seeds in hopes that something good's going to come out of that. Communication perceived as mean may involve what and how something is said. As I said, if you have discernment, you can just read a text that comes to you, and it doesn't say anything about how the other person is feeling. It's just maybe stating a fact, but you pick up on it right away. There's this, there's something wrong on the other side. And then you know to contact that person and say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? And then see if you can draw something out of them to find out what's happening. Tone, facial expressions, body language, all aspects of nonverbal communication play a crucial role. A lack of understanding or empathy, attunement, can lead parents to ignore these nonverbal cues, making their communication seem more hostile and caring. Oftentimes, I might have in the past did a lot more family counseling than I'm doing now, but in the past through the church, get a lot of family referrals, and you could see the faces on the kids when they come in with the parents, and you could tell, they're not feeling that caring, that love, or that understanding. And when we talk about it and we start to learn to convey that to the children in the counseling, that their eyes get bigger and they start looking forward to communicating more with that parent. And the parent starts looking forward to it as well, instead of thinking of it as they got to point the finger and make them do what they're told to do, because they're taking it personal. They're taking it as an insult that they're not being respected as a parent. I don't know, did Jesus do that? Did he convey that? Did he do this? Or did he say, let's talk about it. Let's have an understanding. Let me explain to you why this is happening and that's happening and so on. Or let me tell you, if you do this, that good's going to come from it and so on. I didn't see him doing this except maybe to the Pharisees. The long-term effects of such communication can be certainly a detrimental, not a good thing. It's not going to help the brain of the child to thrive, their mind to thrive. Research by Kim Spoon indicates that children of parents who lack empathy are at a higher risk of developing emotional and behavioral problems. Now, when they say at a higher risk, that what they're saying is in the research, statistically, there was a statistical significance in the number that they've identified of those children having increased emotional and behavioral problems compared to the control group and another group that they may have as part of the research. And so they feel misunderstood and not valued. There's a sense of worthlessness that may go along with them like a shadow through their life if they're not getting help for themselves because of that lack of empathy by parents. Finally, interpreting communication as mean can also be subjective, influenced by child's temperament, personality, and needs for satisfaction, security, and significance. So temperament plays into it. Now, I'm a professional member of the National Christian Counselors Association that specializes in temperaments, understanding temperaments, surveying, identifying temperaments. They've identified 3 main need areas which go along with those 3 main needs of satisfaction, security, and significance. And in those 3 areas, what they've learned in their research is that you can have a different temperament in each area. And that's why these paper tests that we might do in churches, they're not very good. They're not very accurate. If you have a dominant temperament, yeah, it's gonna reflect that on those paper tests. But otherwise, if it's not broken down into those three areas, in having a different temperament in those three areas, the possibility of having a different temperament in those three areas, it's just not going to make complete sense to you. But the computer, in the digital age, they were able to do this digitally in breaking it down. So it really needs to go through a computer system, an algorithm, to break that down enough where if you do have different temperaments in those areas, you're going to act differently in those areas. So socially, you may be, as an example, a melancholy temperament. Well, let's say this. Let's say you're a sanguine temperament in social, so outgoing, talkative, communicative, upbeat, and socializing and wanting to be and do and all that. But in affection, they could be melancholy, loner, serious, private in affection, deep in affection, and not wanting too much hugging or all that because they kind of are sensitive and all that. So very different. And so they engage with someone. Hey, I love you. Everything's great. Let's get married. The longer they're interacting with people and they become close friends, or maybe they get married too quickly, and now they're acting very differently. They've backed off. It's as if they are disinterested or wanting more deep relationship, but they used to be more fun-loving and active and all that. So you can have those differences which can throw you off and think, well, this isn't the person I cared about, or this isn't the friend that I had. I don't think they want to be with me anymore. Yet they do, but they're relating differently. And so in the same way, and in control, that decision-making responsibility area, that security area, they could have a different temperament there as well, which can make them handle responsibilities in a different manner than they would socially and in affection, in the way they make decisions. Whew. Boy, that can get confusing, can't it? But if you do that survey and you identify, now this makes sense, it all fits together, and that's great. So in the same way with children, parents need to understand your children have those different temperaments, so their needs are going to be different. That's why you don't treat your children all the same. You got to realize their uniqueness in parenting and address each one in their unique way. How do you do that if you don't have empathy? If you're not picking up on that, it's very difficult. And so you might have a husband and a wife, and the husband or the wife may have that empathy and they're picking up on it, but the other one isn't, and the other one wants to stick by the rules and punish the broken, when there's a broken rule, and be harsher and so on and so forth. But it might work for child number one, but it may not work for child number 2 or 3, and cause more difficulties as they become teenagers. Because if you're not empathizing with your kids when they're young, you're going to have more trouble in parenting as they get older. Peer and educational influences can also generate realistic or unrealistic expectations of how they or the child should be parented, and we want those realistic expectations. What one person perceives as direct or straightforward, another might see harsh or mean. A sanguine and extrovert, they want direct and straightforward, and let's talk about it, and they might blow up, and 5 minutes later they forgot why they got upset. But the melancholy and affection, they want softer communicating, they want deeper communicating, they want to understand what's being communicated, and they have trouble venting that anger because they don't want conflict. They avoid conflict at all costs, but they hold it in and it sinks in. And as it sinks in, it builds pressure on the inside. And that can come into an eruption at some point later, but basically holding a grudge or passive aggressive in the way they express themselves when they get upset is very different. And if you have a child that's like that, you have to relate to them in those different ways. But if you're doing it with empathy, you're able to do that. And they pick up on it. Gutty Hunst and Kim, in their research, discuss how cultural variations affect communication styles and their perceptions. I just heard a story the other day of a tribe in Africa. And they were talking about the Bible and how different people might interpret different things in the Bible. But this particular tribe, their culture, thieves and robbers, what they would do is knock at the door, and if no one answered, then they would break in and loot the place. So in their culture, knocking at the door was considered a threat. Was considered it's a thief at the door, and you didn't do that. But instead of knocking at the doors, people would come to a house and they would speak, "Hello, is anyone home? This is so-and-so, or this is your mother-in-law, or this is whoever," and you'd know, okay, answer the door, and so on. They were welcomed into the home. So if the passage where it says Jesus knocks at the door to let him in, they couldn't use that, and the missionaries couldn't use that passage. They had changed that passage to be able to say, Jesus speaks, he's at the door, let him in. Yeah. Oh, okay. They could relate to that. Now that wasn't exactly the right translation, but it was the way they understood Jesus to be. Kids are that way too. You might have a child who understands something you say, but the other child takes it differently. So you have to speak to the other child differently. And that's where empathy comes in. How do you know that if you're not empathetic, if you're not discerning? You have to be to pick up on that. Otherwise, you're just going to do it the same, and why should you do it any different? And if it's right for you, it ought to be right for them. Now, there's going to be trouble there. There's going to be difficulties, and we don't want that in parenting. The fewer difficulties, the better. A parent's lack of empathy can distort the transmission of emotional content, leading to communication that's perceived as mean and insensitive. This can have profound impacts on relationships and individual mental and emotional and spiritual development. Therefore, understanding and enhancing parents' discernment promotes healthier family dynamics and more effective communication. The Bible tells us, "Know this, my beloved brothers and sisters, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt." I always say, put a little sugar in what you have to say. Seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths or out of your behavior or your expressions. I'm adding that in there, of course. Out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. If one gives an answer before he hears, it's his folly and shame. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. A soft answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stirs up anger. All that's so true. Follow it. Pay attention to the Bible. Read it. Start learning some stuff if you haven't been reading it. Do a little at a time. Start in the New Testament. Do a little at a time. And it's a manual on life. and it helps you a great deal with parenting. Well, next time we're going to get into parenting with purpose in this next segment of the foundations part, which will be part 3. We're going to be fostering that empathy. So here's where we're going to talk about how do I get empathy, or how can I foster it? How can I develop it? And we'll be talking about the 5 essential steps for parents to learn understanding. And next time we'll get into step 1 and step 2. So I hope you'll be there to join us. And if you know a friend who's having difficulties with parenting, let them know. So, read as many books as you can read, and watch as many YouTubes as you can watch, and learn as much as you can learn. Watch other parents, and you can't get enough of that, because there's always something new to learn. Well, may your troubles be minor, blessings more, and happiness come through your door. God bless.